morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on Anakazi Online Conversations today, where we'll be talking about the Stanbic Bank Zambia PMI, its impact, what it talks about, and why it makes interesting reading. My name is Victor Chileshe. I'm head of global markets for Stanbic Bank Zambia. And to help me discuss this, I have Mwelwa Kenneth, founder and CEO of Financial Insights Zambia. Joining me today to discuss the PMI is Mwelwa Kenneth, founder and CEO of Financial Insights Zambia. Welcome, Mwelwa.
Thank you very much, Victor, and thanks to you and the Stanbic family for inviting me to come and discuss the PMI and what its impact actually is. And, I'm really excited about having this conversation.
Yeah, so I know you're a keen follower of the PMI because I'm guaranteed of getting a phone call from you around the 5th working day of the month to follow up on when we're publishing the PMI. Yeah, but it's been interesting. I think we've been doing it for the last, from 2015? We've been doing that survey from 2015. And when you look at the trends and see some of the commentary that comes in from the panelists, it kind of gives you a sense that it really is, as you said, speaking to the pulse of business conditions. You saw the April one.
Yes, I did, and thank you so much for sharing it. And one of the things that we obviously picked up, because we've been following, and thanks to you guys for sharing that particular report, because though we look at it from a different lens, our focus has mostly been to track, what the impact is of certain economic indicators and what it translates to in terms of business. For us, PMI was obviously something that we felt that we would actually be able to, to make some sort of a correlation in terms of some of the company data that we're actually able to see. And in terms of the financial performance of companies, we are always, Financial Insight is always, following and analyzing companies that are listed on the Lusaka Stock Exchange. And we discovered that, in terms of company performance, one of the things that we were able now to connect with the wider environment was following what was going on with the PMI that you guys actually produce, which obviously, for us spoke to, why certain companies would have certain particular strategies at different periods of time. But obviously for me, coming from my end, where we are analyzing this, the PMI and the effect on companies, we obviously also want to know a bit more about what goes into you guys conducting the survey. So I think that would be quite interesting because now it ties into what we're doing.
Yeah, and you're very right. I think you and I can go straight into flight around PMI, thinking that our audience out there know exactly what we're talking about. So I'll just break down the PMI very quickly. So PMI is basically an acronym for Purchasing Managers Index. So it was called that because usually you have the purchasing manager who is very well in touch with what's going on within an organization. They do the purchasing, hiring of whatever services are required for that organization to run. So it's a legacy kind of name. But what the PMI does is that it measures a number of aspects around the business. So it will measure employment levels, it will measure levels of output, how much the company is producing, backlog of orders, whether the company has a lot of orders that they are unable to meet, input costs, that's the cost of raw materials, and a number of other things. It also does measure outlook in terms of the view of that business, in terms of the prosperity or future outlook of the sector in which they're in. So what it is that it ranges in terms of different sectors that replicate the sectors that contribute to GDP. So you have manufacturing, you have trades, you have wholesale, mining and quarrying, and all those, I think, form part of the panelists. We have 400 panelists that are interviewed in the second half of the month, and the results are always released on the 5th working day of every month. So it's basically a measure of business conditions. Like, I think if you've been following Mwelwa, you've noticed that the one consistent commentary that people, the panelists, have been saying is the lack of money. And when you say lack of money, what do you mean? Oh, and when you explore it, as we're talking, even the minister himself would talk about it. The governor was talking about it in the last MPC discussion or announcement. It speaks to things like government arrears. People have not been paid, and as such, they haven't got the money for them to continue with their business. And to speak about April's, what I found, we've gone through, I think things haven't been so good for a while. We haven't printed above 50, which is basically meaning, again, I'll need to explain what I mean there. So the PMI measures from about 0 to 100. So 0 meaning very, very bad. 50 meaning everything is the same, previous month and current month. Okay, nothing changed. Above 50 would give you an indication that things are better this month than the prior month. So Mwelwa, this one was, I think, 44 or something like that. And I think when you look at, the narrative around why it was 44, it's largely based on the lockdown or the lock-in for us, where guys are not getting inputs because logistics would not allow. Botswana's closed, South Africa's been closed, and I don't know what your take is, speaking to guys in the real sector.
Yes. What's obviously, Victor, what's obviously quite interesting was that essentially from what you guys have been able to pick up on the surveys, for us, when we look at some of the financial results that actually come out with companies, especially when we started tracking company performance for 2019, some of the things and the feedback that you guys have obviously received have been echoed in some of the statements that have come out from some of the listed companies. Annually, they would have an annual general meeting, or whenever they announce their quarterly results, there'll be a bit of a commentary in and around how the economy has actually impacted their businesses. And consistently, like you'd mentioned, some of most of the CEOs and CFOs would actually indicate liquidity challenges. Now, essentially, what this now, and I guess this is obviously why it becomes important to track things like PMI, is that what we're observing is that most of these companies are actually using this information now to plan around their business strategies. Case in point, for example, when we observed two companies, we did an analysis most recently on Lafarge's 2019 performance, and more recently again we also analyzed Zambia Sugar's a half-year performance for 2020. On the one side, for the cement company, one of the comments that we actually noted from there was certain things that were going on in the macro, which is basically consistent with some of the feedback that has come from some of the purchasing managers. And when I looked at the the April report, it's like everything now begins to now tie in. The business sentiment in terms of how these business owners are looking at the prospects of the companies going forward, but then also it then now like for example in the case of Zambia Sugar, what we're noticing is that in a way they've also been fairly agile in terms of their approach to strategy, meaning that when they understand that business conditions are not that great, they can then now alter their strategies going forward, which goes on to reemphasize why something like PMI, which is a very frequent economic indicator, and which comes out on a monthly basis, which more or less like allows these companies to track economic performance on a regular basis. But then also another thing that we've also been able to observe, because we tend to drill down into the company financials. We also notice that companies, because of the sort of economic environment that we're in, and some of the parameters that go into the computation of PMI, we're actually able to see a link in terms of the behavior of CFOs, in terms of how some of these businesses are financed. You rightly put it that if some of the sentiment was a lack of liquidity, we're actually able to see that some CFOs would actually decide on particular capital structures that maybe say would either, as opposed to financing certain activities in the company organically through maybe the money that they make, the revenue, they would probably go and seek out financing from institutions such as yours. But then again, at the same time, we're also observing that certain financial officers are obviously very, very cautious in terms of the spending, because when business sentiment is very, very low and inventories are not moving, what we then now begin to see, and it speaks to other indicators such as employment numbers, we begin now to start seeing commentary about like, for example, when we went through your December report, we noticed that employment was fairly sluggish. But then when you guys reported in April, for the first time, we'd now observed that employment now was actually much lower. So that obviously brings a bit of a concern, because what that will mean is that it means that companies are not financing operations that much, meaning that there's contraction. With contraction, it means that you most likely experience a situation where the demand for jobs is not really, really high. But then also that can also mean that some of these companies now will begin now to start thinking around maybe, say, issues of automation. So these are some of the just examples of how we see things like PMI speaking to company strategies for for certain companies going forward. But then also, Zambia has not been the only country that has recorded a low one. I think from your recent report, we observed that many countries had also reported a fairly sharp dip. What comments do you have in and around there, and are they similar to some of the things that Zambia is going through?
Yeah, they are similar. And surprisingly, when I looked at that chart, the only region, or if you like, sub-region that seemed to be in green above 50 was India. I didn't explore as to why, but I think the Eurozone, US, Latin America, the Far East, Middle East are all, we're all in red, below 50, 45, there and there's about. But I mean, in your discussion, we are basically looking and talking about the larger corporates. But my take is that, a larger corporate was once probably an SME, even now. And I get the sense that even when I'm looking at this PMI as a person who runs a little shop somewhere, these things kind of speak to me in terms of what I would see from an offtake point of view. People, as opposed to buying a basket full of things, are buying 2 or 3 items simply because it's speaking through to the unemployment bit since the onset of this COVID kind of pandemic. People are working a lot more from home and would rather have stocked up in bulk and don't really come out for fear of contracting, and just that the social distancing kind of thing. But I think we have been in trouble, if you like, for the past, it's well known we have been in a spot of bother, if you like. But I think with the onset of this COVID, pandemic, that's to me, that's what I attribute the sharp dive. Because if you notice, even when we went through the worst we saw, which was around September 2015, and it's reflected in the PMI chart when the currency depreciated so rapidly. The PMI really quickly recovered, because I think business people felt that, look, this was just a dip and we would readjust. But even as we've gone along, the one thing that hasn't really been impacted is employment. And it just goes to show the extent of the lockdown. If you look at even like the US, it's record levels of unemployment. If we are saying, oh, bars, casinos were shut, people have been laid off. If you're unable to source raw materials because of borders being shut, you're unable to produce. So some employees become excess to requirements. You'd rather keep them at home on a half salary as you wait for this thing to kind of dissipate. So it is a document for me that really speaks and helps one to plan. If I'm thinking now, I'm saying, okay, what do I need to do for my business, since I'm so dependent on the employed? It will tell me to say, look, this is what it is. What are the other people thinking? That, look, I think things are beginning to open up, so should I stock up a little bit more, because I think the employment numbers are coming, and that's even at an SME, at an SME level, and that transcends, everyone who's in business and who relies, which most of us do, who relies on the economy to make a living. But your point was interesting as well, where you said, there's contraction, which is reflected even in the results itself, because it's such a sharp dip. And even the projections are that we are likely to go into recession. You know what I mean? After 20 years, our economy is going to shrink for the first time in 20 years, and it was in the MPC statement. And it's fairly clear from guys that we're not selling as much, so our number is going to be a lot less. We add, say, 10 to that whole GDP number. This year we're going to add 5, simply because we're not doing as much business as we did. And so when that amalgamates, it becomes into a far lesser number than we had hoped in terms of total GDP growth going forward. You see, so for me, that's how real, and that is why I think we've invested in that, because financial information, as you would attest to, is often very difficult to
For
get
Zambia,
in one
yes.
in
Yeah.
one place.
Yes,
You know what I mean?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I kind of stumbled upon the PMI more or less by accident. It was one of those. I mean, yes, it's covered in most economic courses, etc. But when I was doing the Bloomberg financial journalist program last year, that's when I actually realized the significance of it. For a lot of our viewers, they need to understand that with something like PMI, which is something that's very frequent, I think more and more now, I think various agencies now are beginning to realize its importance and its significance. And I think we saw it even last week, sorry, when the governor announced, the Q2 MPC. Made the Q2 MPC announcement that slide number 7 actually talked about, in addition to their own business survey that's conducted on a quarterly basis, but they actually explicitly mentioned the report that you compile. So it's beginning to show that its importance, and why it's an economic metric that needs to be tracked on a regular basis. But then you also talked about something that was also very important, and I feel that there's a lot of SMEs that are obviously going to be watching this show. Why would they want to be tracking this PMI? And I think we've rightly explained that when you're looking at issues around the value chain, how purchasing managers are going to be behaving, being able to understand the behavior of purchasing managers. What that entails is that you can actually position yourself in a manner that you will know whether you need to now seek out financing to be able to supply, or you need to now hold back, or maybe even look at alternative products. But then what's obviously another thing that's very encouraging is that because Zambia is not the only country that obviously measures PMI, and we've rightly put it. I think there's a lot of importers of goods and services. I'm thinking about the lady that owns a salon, and she's buying her hair maybe from China, etc. By observing what the PMI is, and especially with what COVID has actually done, that person would actually be able now to tell that chances are that they'll probably have huge issues in terms of getting supply. I mean, I was actually at when I was getting ready for the show, I went to the barbershop yesterday, and the lady who owns the shop was actually telling me that things like foot traffic to her store, to her shop, had actually dropped by 50% compared to the same time last year. So if you then now relate that now to to PMI, it also, there is some sort of a correlation there, that that demand obviously has actually gone down, and these are just some of the things that actually make it relatable. But then again, for business owners, I think it's fairly prudent, and I think this is one of the things that we were talking about before we got on the show, is that what could they possibly do, and maybe how can the bank come in now to actually help, especially in a time like this. I don't know if you've got any comment on that.
Yeah, well, I think the bank has been very consistent in saying, talk to us. We engage our clients quite a lot, and in some cases anticipate a lot of these things with the information like the PMI. We can kind of see which sectors are going to be in a bit of a spot of bother, if you like, and have those discussions, beforehand. I don't think anyone would have predicted that we'd go into this COVID pandemic. In December we're making plans that have really been thrown out the window, really, and we're trying to navigate the new normal, if you like. And so, our clients talk to us. We're able to help, offer some relief here and there. But it's just important for us that we keep close to our clients and use things like the PMI just to get a sense of the broader economy and what kind of sectors are really being impacted, and then take this even beforehand to our clients and say, look, this is what we are seeing. I don't know how is it with you, and you find we were kind of also trying to put our finger on it. So it's actually not just peculiar to us, but it's kind of wider spread in the context of the Zambian economy. So yeah, I mean, it's not it's no silver bullet sorts out. Clients have got their own nuances, but we deal those things case by case, to your point. And just, I think, maybe to close, if you like. There's one thing that I also stood out in this particular in the April PMI report, and that is business outlook.
Outlook, yeah.
It was at its worst. I
At
think.
its worst, yes.
And that just speaks to the fact that no one really knows when this thing is going to, when there's going to be a vaccine, going to be, and the phrase now is, this is our new normal, and it's something that we're going to live with. But you can kind of sense, even from the business community, and that they're very uncertain in terms of when things are going to open up and become them going to be able to access inputs, then start re-employing, and whether business will be at the same level it was prior to this kind of thing. I don't know what sense you are getting.
Yeah, in fact, it was one of the things that I'm beginning to observe, especially from conversations with business owners. Obviously, like you mentioned, come December, certain companies had particular plans for 2020. Most of those plans have been thrown out the window. So what we're beginning to now see is that many companies, and even the small ones as well, they're re-looking at some of their business plans for 2020 and going forward. The ones that have been, obviously, if it's the small ones that are saying that, no, look, it's survival of the fittest. We will try as much as possible to survive. We're now, from the conversations we're having with them, they're now looking at different ways in which they can actually finance, some of their operations. Some of them have actually even, decided to to push back certain plans of investing in, maybe, say, capital projects, which would suck out quite a bit of money. Because for the simple reason that because of the uncertainty that's there, and not knowing how long that this is going to now last, they would want to actually have a pool of cash to tap into, so that they're able now to meet some of their costs, such as staffing costs, etc. But then also this has meant that most of these companies are now looking at revamping their budgets in light of COVID. They've had to now sit back and relook at their budgets, look at what is essential and non-essential. I mean, there was the joke earlier on when COVID started that if you're sitting at home, it means you're non-essential, but if you're going into the office, you're an essential worker. But this is just another thing that's actually coming up. But then also, for the first time, for many, especially small companies now, we're also now beginning to see most of them now discuss issues of contingency, because events like this, it's a black swan event. It was never anticipated, but now that we understand that it's actually possible, some of them now are beginning now to think, outside the box in terms of, if this ever had to happen again, what could we possibly do, to avoid the sort of impact that that this can actually have. But then what that means now is that, some might have to, re-ask themselves the quintessential question of, what business are we actually in? And we tend to feel that, that will have an impact in terms of how some of these businesses actually, approach some of their operations. I mentioned earlier on that in events, for example, where maybe say, and this might even have an impact on the number of employees that they actually retain, because they'll probably be thinking of automation. But these are some of the realities of what a black swan event like COVID can actually have, and how when you now look at the impact that it's had on various economies, and being able now to relate this now to to the PMI results that you guys have produced, and in terms of going forward, how companies can actually use this information to plan their operations going forward. So I think going forward, it's going to be quite an interesting period, and for us, we'll continue analyzing the company data, and obviously giving you feedback on the report that you guys produced. Please keep me on the mailing list, because we find it very, very useful.
No, I think that's guaranteed. And look, thank you. I think we've it's been an interesting discussion, and looking at how reflective the PMI has been, and showing us the real impact of this pandemic on businesses out there. So thank you for joining me on.
All right. Thank you very much, Victor, for having me.
Anakazi Online Conversations. So for those viewers that are wondering where you'll be able to access the PMI report, we release it on the 5th working day of every month on all Stanbic Zambia social media platforms. So that's where you'll be able to get it. So till the next time, thank you for joining us.